Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 Turtles in Time blasted out of the sewers and onto your Super NES back in 1992. Developed and published by Konami, Turtles in Time was what many consider to be the pinnacle of Konami's long line of beat-em-ups that graced the arcades from the late 80s and into the early 90s. While the arcade version enjoyed a ton of success, most of us kids were counting the days until it was ported to home consoles. Thankfully, Konami wasn't about to leave fans hanging and finally released the game for the Super NES, but not before making several alterations to the game that wasn't in the original arcade version. But did Konami's changes sink a surefire hit? Or was Turtles in Time for the Super NES everything us kids loved about the arcade game and even more? Well, put on your favorite ninja mask, because we're about to see if Turtles in Time can raise some shell. Start up Turtles in Time and you're treated to a hilarious opening cinematic where Krang literally steals the goddamn Statue of Liberty while April's filming her evening newscast. This of course pisses the Turtles off to no end and vow to get Lady Liberty back at any cost, even if it means traveling through time to do so. Yes, the story is ludicrous and silly, but when have anything the Turtles ever done not been? After you've taken in the story, go ahead and press start and pick your favorite mutated turtle, and then get ready to smash some Foot Clan. Get into the game proper and you'll be doing exactly what you want to be doing in a Turtles video game, beating the hell out of everything Shredder throws at you. To do so, you'll have your basic set of beat-em-up attacks, including your main volley of punches and kicks using the attack button, a jumping attack to make sure you don't land on a foot soldier's fist, and an absolutely brutal throw where you slam poor foot soldiers back and forth onto the cold, hard ground, killing any other enemies near it. You can still press jump and attack at the same time for a power attack like in the first Turtles arcade game, but this time you lose health when you use it, so it's now relegated to getting you out of a jam instead of spamming it constantly. You also get a few power-ups lying around the stages to help you out when things get rough, including a spinning attack that can take out anyone in its path, along with that all-important pizza to refill your health. Beyond that though, there's not much else you need to make your way to the end of the game, but that's okay though, since Turtles in Time is so much fun, you won't be missing out on anything else. If you haven't gathered by now, with the title of the game being Turtles in Time, the game's main gimmick is sending you back and forth through time. While the first few stages will be your standard Big Apple location like city streets and sewers, things quickly get super weird when Shredder sends everyone through time in order to keep the Turtles at bay. Suddenly you'll be fighting through prehistoric stages filled with dinosaurs, pirate ships, and even riding on hoverboards in a futuristic city. Thankfully, it's more than just a dumb gimmick, since the variety it gives the game really goes a long way in staving off the repetitiveness that comes with these types of beat-em-up games. The various locations and fun new enemies and bosses each one brings keeps the experience fresh and fun all the way to the last boss. The enemy variety in particular is really great here, with a huge selection of various foot soldiers and other enemies populating each stage for you to deal with. And while the game's 9 stages may not be super long, repeat playthroughs can be just as much fun as the first time, especially if you bring a friend along for some awesome co-op gameplay. All of this together helped Turtles in Time accomplish a rare feat ever seen in beat-em-up games. It really never seems to get boring. As mentioned before, Turtles in Time isn't an arcade-perfect port. A few of the arcade stages have been reworked a bit and turned into bonus stages for the Super NES, like Stage 3's Sewer Surfing level. Stage 8's Neon Knight Riders level also gets the bonus stage treatment as well, but even goes a step further and gives it a complete Mode 7 makeover, giving it an awesome 3D scrolling effect that was absent in the arcade. The Super NES version also added several new fan-favorite bosses into the game that were either replacing less popular bosses from the arcade or adding brand new ones. Some of the best new bosses included the likes of Slash, the Rat King, Bebop and Rocksteady, and even an appearance by Super Shredder himself as the last boss. Turtles in Time is one of those classic games that seems to almost always be mentioned in a tone of reverie among gamers, and for good reason. Not only was Konami at the very top of their game when they made the arcade original, but then took it one step further and somehow made the Super NES game even better. Of course, Turtles in Time is still just as much fun to play now as it was then, and it continues to age better all the time, as beat-em-ups are mostly relegated to lifeless free-to-play mobile games these days. Going back and playing Turtles in Time shows just how much fun a beat-em-up can be when you've got some truly talented developers making one. And while I doubt we'll ever see the genre return to what it was back in the early 90s, it's always nice to know that Turtles in Time will always be the game that beat-em-ups are compared to for as long as they exist. And if that's not worth a cowabunga! then I don't know what is. Wrecking Crew hammered its way onto your NES back in 1985. Developed and published by Nintendo, Wrecking Crew was part of the original launch lineup for the NES when it was released here in the US. Unfortunately though, due to everyone's excitement surrounding other launch titles like Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, Wrecking Crew was pushed to the side, where it was left to collect dust with the likes of other forgotten NES launch titles like Golf and Clu Clu Land. But was everyone missing out on a real NES gem here, or was Wrecking Crew rightfully tossed aside in the wake of far better games to play on your brand new NES? Well, grab your favorite oversized hammer, because we're about to see if Wrecking Crew is worth smashing the door down for. Start up Wrecking Crew and you get a super basic menu screen that allows you to select whatever stage you want to play on, the number of characters, yes, this was actually a 2-player co-op game, and amazingly enough, a level editor to make your own stages with. If this is your first time playing Wrecking Crew, then just go ahead and stick with stage 1 so that you're not instantly confused with what's happening, and then go ahead and get into the game to start wrecking things. Once you're into the game, you'll get a quick overview of the level before the game spawns you at the bottom of the screen, and then it's up to you to figure out what you need to do. Basically, Wrecking Crew is a deceptively simple puzzle game where you have to run around each level as Mario, yes, that's totally Mario, and use your hammer to destroy every door, ladder, and brick wall you see to finish the level. While it's easy enough to run left and right and smash everything you see, you'll quickly learn that you'll need a bit more strategy than just running around wrecking stuff with wild abandon. The first thing you'll notice is that in a totally crazy turn of events, Mario can't jump at all. All he can do is fall straight down when you reach the edge of a platform. This means that you'll need to plot out a path through the level before you start, so you can fall onto platforms below to continue your onslaught. If you by chance fall with no way back up, then you've effectively failed the level, with no way to restart other than just to kill yourself. And as you can imagine, later levels will give you little to no help in how you need to go about solving a level, leading to a lot of trial and error when trying to solve them. Keep your wits about you though, and you should be wrecking through stages in no time. Wrecking Crew does at least put a few obstacles in your way besides you just trying to figure out your way through a stage. Stage obstacles include things like fireballs that randomly spawn to the left and right of where you're standing, bombs that can destroy everything connected to the left and right of them but can also knock you to the bottom of the stage if you're too close, and also the ever-present threat of various enemies that roam around after you. The enemies themselves are usually easily avoided, but their persistence can definitely make some of the levels more frantic than they would be otherwise. And last but not least, you get a Robot Mario that exists only to be the biggest asshole ever in a video game. Robot Mario will constantly follow you around the stage trying to disrupt everything you're doing, and will regularly knock you back down to the bottom of the stage with his hammer. He'll usually do this at the worst times too, sometimes trapping you in a spot that you can't get out of, forcing you to wait for that damn fireball to appear so you can end your suffering and try again. It's hard enough to solve some of these stages without having this raging asshole shadowing you like some sort of hellbent stalker. Thankfully, you can knock him back down as well, but Robot Mario will always be your biggest annoyance on any level he appears in. Once you've mastered the fundamentals of how the game works, you should be able to make your way through the game without too much trouble, besides just solving the stages. Thankfully, even though you do have a limited number of lives to continue each stage with, you can always use the stage select on the menu screen to go back to where you were before if you run out of lives, though you do lose your score when you do so. And trust me, you'll be doing that a lot, since like any good puzzle game, Wrecking Crew will get devilishly hard in the later levels. I honestly don't think I've ever beat some of these stages to this day, but I always have fun coming back and trying every now and again. At least until Robot Mario knocks me off a platform and causes me to fail a stage that I'd been working on for several minutes. And that's about when Wrecking Crew goes back into the closet and I have to go outside to rethink what I'm doing with my life. At least most levels are open-ended enough that you do have a few different ways of going about how you want to solve them, and this definitely helps give the game that one more try mentality that can make it all the more satisfying when you finally do beat a level, especially when things were getting super frustrating in it. If you are getting too frustrated though, you can always try your hand at the included level editor, where you can make your own levels. This was actually pretty amazing to see back in the day, especially for a launch NES title. Obviously the editor is super simple, but it allows you to make just about any level you can imagine and then force your friends to play it. Sadly, even if you do make an awesome level, the US version of Wrecking Crew won't actually allow you to save it, even though it has the save and load options on the menu. This feature was actually only for the Japanese Famicom disc version of the game, but was unfortunately left in just to, I guess, confuse the hell out of us kids when it was released here. Still though, just being able to make your own level in the game and then play it was still really cool for the time, and I probably spent way too much time making those crappy levels as a kid. Personally for me, Wrecking Crew was actually the very first NES game I ever played. I can still remember going over to my friend's house when he got his NES, expecting to see something like Mario Brothers or Excitebike being played. But I instead saw everyone sitting around Wrecking Crew like it was one of the hottest games that no one ever knew about. And after playing it for a few minutes myself, I was kinda convinced it was. There's just something about Wrecking Crew that really captures my attention every time I play it. The open-ended nature on how you can tackle some levels and just how much fun it is to run around and smash stuff never really gets old to me. It's actually one of the few puzzle games I regularly go back to and play to this day, since I've never been that big of a fan of the genre as a whole to begin with. It may have some frustrating issues that haven't aged well, like being able to fail levels with no way to restart other than just to die, but there's something so satisfying about finally completing a tough level that you've spent countless lives on trying to beat that it washes any problems that the game may have into the background. And let's not forget that awesome two-player co-op mode that makes it even more fun to solve puzzles when you've got a friend around. So if you're a fan of puzzle games, go ahead and grab a copy of Wrecking Crew for yourself. It may have played second fiddle to the other more popular games when it was launched, but as far as I'm concerned, Wrecking Crew still wrecks the majority of them. Jurassic Park 2: The Chaos Continues rampaged onto your Super NES back in 1995. Developed and published by Ocean Software, Jurassic Park 2 wasn't actually based on the Jeff Goldblum-led travesty that was The Lost World, but was instead its very own game, released a full 2 years before the actual sequel ever saw the light of day. I imagine this was mostly due to Ocean Software holding on to that expensive Jurassic Park license with no new movies on the horizon, so they just decided to make their own sequel, and then shove it out to eager kids jonesing for more dinosaur murder simulators. So was Jurassic Park 2 worth hunting down? Or was this just another case of a publisher needing a quick buck and then milking a popular license? Well, grab your favorite archaeological tools, because we're about to see if Jurassic Park 2 is worth digging up. Start the game up and you're treated to an impressive, fully animated and voiced opening cinematic that tries to explain why you'd be insane enough to go back to a dinosaur-infested island. Turns out that John Hammond's main rival, Biosyn, get it? Biosyn? Is out to capture dinosaurs for their own evil purposes. Hammond, meanwhile, apparently having gone absolutely insane, wants to reopen the park for visitors and needs you to clear out the Biosyn guys while somehow making the park safe enough to open it again. Basically, the plot's nothing more than a flimsy crutch holding up a game that's just all about army guys shooting at other army guys with some dinosaurs thrown in for good measure. And as you can probably imagine, the story completely vanishes as soon as you press the start button. So let's just go ahead and do that now so we can get this over with. Once you're past the story, the game gives you a mission select screen so you can choose which stage you want to tackle first. And then it's time to get into the game proper, where you're met with a very straightforward run-and-gun style action game. If you were maybe expecting Jurassic Park 2 to be more like the really cool adventure game first-person shooter hybrid that the first Jurassic Park game on the Super NES was, then you'll probably be a bit disappointed when Contra with dinosaurs pops up on your screen. And that's essentially what you get here. So if you've ever played a side-scrolling action game before, then you know exactly what you're in for with Jurassic Park 2. Essentially, you'll be doing a lot of running and jumping while shooting at enemy soldiers and dinosaurs with various lethal and non-lethal weapons. And as you can imagine, the island is absolutely crawling with Biosyn guys and dinosaurs coming at you from every direction, so you'll never lack for anything to shoot at. It's just that doing so gets fairly repetitive and old pretty quickly. It also doesn't help that the gameplay itself can vary from annoying to maddening, with some of the dinosaurs giving you almost zero time to react before you're hit, and soldiers taking shots at you from off the screen. Each mission does at least have you going to various parts of the island, which does give the game a good deal of visual variety, but if you were tired and annoyed of running around and shooting at stuff by the end of the first stage, the rest of the stages aren't going to get you more excited about things. Honestly, it's not exactly bad, but by the time Jurassic Park 2 came out, everyone was so tired of these types of games that it felt more like you were just going through the motions when playing it, rather than actually having a good time, and that's exactly what it feels like here. Jurassic Park 2 does at least have one interesting trick up its sleeve to keep you on your toes though. If you had managed to read through the instruction booklet, you may remember reading about Hammond asking you to not kill certain dinosaurs so he can save some of his investment in the island. Suddenly the reason why you have a selection of lethal and non-lethal weapons is cleared up, since you actually need to use the non-lethal guns on the dinosaurs Hammond wants to keep. If you accidentally kill one of them, then the number next to the Jurassic Park symbol by your health bar will count down from 100. Kill 100 of the dinos that you're not supposed to kill, and it's game over. So you'll need to be switching back and forth between guns that actually kill things, and then back to stuff like stun guns and gas grenades when you see one of those so-called good dinosaurs you need to save, even though he's probably actively trying to murder you as you're trying to save its life. If this all sounds like a colossal pain in the ass, then you'd be right. You can at least kill those evil velociraptors and T-Rexes with no penalty, but just about every other dinosaur in the game will need to be tranquilized. While it's kinda cool that they tried to throw in a gimmick besides just shoot everything with a machine gun to win the game, it unfortunately adds needless, constant weapon switching into an already dull and annoying action game. While it may have finally been nice to get a pure Jurassic Park action game on the Super NES, no one really seemed to care when it actually hit shelves. Maybe if this was the game that came out when all the original Jurassic Park games were coming out 3 years prior, it might have gotten a much better reaction from fans and critics alike. But by the time 1995 had rolled around, the whole Jurassic Park craze had long since fizzled, and Jurassic Park 2 was met with a chorus of tired sighs and average reviews from critics. The game does at least look and sound great, but all the cool graphics and animated cutscenes in the world probably couldn't have saved Jurassic Park 2 from being anything other than the obvious cash grab tossed out by Ocean Software to squeeze just a bit more money out of that Jurassic Park license. Even so, Jurassic Park 2 isn't awful by any means. I mean, if you're in the market for a mindless run-and-gun style game with the Jurassic Park name slapped on it, then you might not be too disappointed with what's on offer here. And if you got a friend around, you can even play it cooperatively, which was a nice added bonus. For the rest of us that are already drowning in far better Jurassic Park games from the time though, it's probably not worth excavating this toothless dinosaur of a game to play. Star Fox did a barrel roll straight onto your Super NES back in 1993. Developed and published by Nintendo, Star Fox was hyped up to be the poster child for the brand new Super FX chip that could be stuck inside standard Super NES game cartridges, allowing for some basic polygonal graphics that wasn't possible on the system otherwise. Presented as an arcade-style space shooter, Star Fox looked absolutely incredible the first time anyone saw it, since graphics like these were usually reserved for much more powerful arcade games or expensive PCs. Being able to play a fully polygonal game right on your Super Nintendo was a game changer that Nintendo hoped would help extend the life of the Super NES for several more years by using the Super FX chip instead of making people buy a whole new console. So was Star Fox just as good as it looked, or was the game trying to do a bit too much with a system that was never made for this kind of game? Well, grab your favorite gibberish-speaking sidekicks, because we're about to see if Star Fox was as super as the chip that powered it. Start up Star Fox and you're immediately treated to an awesome Star Wars-inspired opening that shows off some of those glorious polygons in the form of a massive warship sent by the evil Andros bearing down on Fox McCloud's home planet. If you can manage to keep your jaw from dislocating from the 17 or so polygons moving around on your TV screen, then go ahead and press start to get into the game. Before you begin though, you're given a few controller setups to choose from, along with an optional training mode that allows you to come to grips with moving your ship around. Once you're confident in your piloting skills, it's off to the map screen, where you're given 3 different paths to take to get to Andros and end the war once and for all. All 3 paths are 5 to 6 stages long, with each one being harder than the last, so it's probably best to choose the default middle path if this is your first time piloting the R-Wing into battle. From there, you'll get a quick briefing by some weird dog colonel guy, and then it's off to do battle with the worst that Andros can throw at you. Get into the game and it's time to start shooting up some of the blockiest spaceships you've ever seen. That's okay though, since there's more than enough things to shoot at to keep your mind off of just how bad Star Fox looks these days. Your main form of shooting things down are your laser guns that fire off in front of you, but being accurate with these will actually take some getting used to, since your ship will shoot in the direction you currently have it pointing, making it kinda hard to tell where your shots will go at certain angles. Things certainly aren't helped much with an awkward camera that just sorta seems to lazily hover behind you, making shooting at stuff in general feel a bit slow and inaccurate overall. This was probably my biggest gripe with the game as a kid, since it never seemed like I could line up a shot when I most needed to, even when it looked like I should be on target. Eventually I kinda got the hang of it, but even then there were times when I would miss an easy target just because I was at a weird angle and couldn't tell where my shot was gonna go. In addition to your lasers, you also get a screen-clearing bomb that works especially well on bosses. Seriously, if you have a few of these bombs saved up, you can take down just about every boss in the game without ever firing a laser at it. Sadly, you only get a limited amount of those bombs and you can only refill them by collecting them throughout the stages, so maybe save them for the bosses and stages that give you the most problems. Besides blowing stuff up, you'll need to master maneuvering your R-Wing around, which can sometimes feel just as clunky as shooting at things. Basic movement around the screen is easy enough, but it's when the game wants you to make quick, exact movements that things start to get frustrating. Slamming into walls and objects in tight areas due to the sluggish movement of your ship will sadly be fairly common until you just learn to memorize the levels. The game does at least give you a few different camera angles to help you judge distance, with the cockpit view being the most useful at doing so, but you can only use that view in space levels for some reason, which kinda makes it useless. While all this probably makes it sound like Star Fox is an unplayable mess, it's not by any means. It's actually a fairly simple shooter that just requires a bit of patience to master, and once you do, you'll be shooting and barrel rolling through stages like it's nothing. As mentioned before, your path through Star Fox is chosen before you start the game, so you won't be seeing all the different levels in a single playthrough. To do that, you'll need to beat each of the 3 paths to get the complete Star Fox experience, and it's more than worth it to do so. Just about every single level on each path feels completely different than the last, with new enemies and bosses in each one. The planets themselves are the real highlights here, with all of them having unique obstacles and situations that make them a ton of fun to blast through over and over again. And while the space stages are probably the least interesting of the bunch, the game does at least do a nice job of adding stuff like a huge armada of ships into the mix just when you think you couldn't possibly play another boring stage in the middle of space. Honestly, the space stages aren't all that bad. I just always enjoyed the variety of planets more than the void of space. The bosses are also worth playing through each path just to see what the game has waiting for you at the end of every level. Most are massive monstrosities that fill the screen and only exist to shoot everything they have at your ship, along with a few weak points that you'll need to focus on while dodging laser fire and whatever the hell else is coming at you. Their unique designs also stand out, with some being huge starships with cannons all over them, or alien-like monstrosities that span the entirety of the screen. One of my favorites isn't even a ship or an alien, but actually a massive generator where you have to constantly dodge electricity as the room spins around you, until you're able to shoot the core and ultimately destroy the entire ship in the most awesome 2 frame per second explosion I've ever seen. All of this together makes each one of Star Fox's paths feel completely different from each other, making you want to immediately start over as soon as you beat one just to see what'll be in the next. Unfortunately, none of the paths are very long, but they're all so much fun that you'll probably end up playing through them multiple times just to get a better score. While Star Fox is genuinely fun, it still has a few problems that sucked back when it was released and has only gotten worse with the passage of time. We've already mentioned the sometimes annoying camera, but by far the biggest problem in the game you've probably noticed throughout this video is the frame rate. The game never seems to go above 15 frames per second when anything is on screen, and sinks even lower when things get hectic. This makes the game's already sluggish controls feel even worse, and can actually cause you to run into objects and enemy fire on a regular basis due to just how choppy it can get. Thankfully, it never ruins the game, but it's a constant issue that you're just gonna have to get used to and account for. Also, for all those Super FX graphics and advertisements claiming full 3D movement, Star Fox is unfortunately nothing more than a basic rail shooter with very little freedom of movement at all. You're constantly being pulled forward, with your only maneuvering being able to fly to the edge of the screen a bit before it pushes you back to the center. This can make a lot of the stages, especially the space stages, feel like nothing more than a shooting gallery rather than piloting a ship. That's not to say it isn't fun, and maybe us kids should have had a more realistic expectation for what a Super NES game could be, but it still kinda sucked when we all found out Star Fox was nothing more than lining up a cursor and shooting at stuff, rather than the full-on space flight sim Nintendo wanted us to think it was. We also couldn't talk about annoying things in Star Fox without mentioning your ever-so-talkative teammates. For the most part, they're content with just being in the background and never really getting in the way besides their constant jibber-jabber. Other times, though, they'll need your help with shooting down an enemy, or they'll just run off in front of you to chase an enemy they want to kill. Either way is super annoying due to them almost always getting in your line of fire and then complaining about it incessantly when you do inevitably shoot them. It can already be challenging enough to line up enemies in this game, and when your own teammates are preventing you from doing so, it makes it even more maddening. Even worse, you have to take your eyes away from the action and look down at a speech box at the bottom of the screen if you want to even know what they're saying, which almost always results in you getting hit in the process. And while their annoying gibberish speak may be endearing to some, I just always ended up turning down the volume and turning up my stereo before the end of Stage 2 just so I didn't have to listen to it anymore. Still though, even with all of its problems, Star Fox is still totally playable somehow to this day, but will unfortunately continue to age way worse than other Super NES classics due to its 3D graphics. Overall, Star Fox is still thought of as one of the Super Nintendo's best games. Again, it probably sounds like I'm kinda hating on the game a lot in this review, but it all comes with an equal amount of praise. The simple but fun gameplay still shines through now, even if those Super FX polygons look like a hot mess these days. Honestly, it's still amazing what the Super FX chip could even do on a system that was never known for its processing power. Sadly though, Star Fox was probably the best known of a fairly small amount of games that ever used the FX chip, as the chip's cost was unfortunately too high to really catch on with other developers. Even Star Fox's own Super NES sequel was eventually cancelled due to cost and development factors, along with the looming launch of the Nintendo 64. And with that new system came the far superior Star Fox 64, which unfortunately kind of makes the original Star Fox look like a cool tech demo relic rather than a must-play classic game these days. Still though, if you ever want to see where Fox McCloud got his start, I think you'll still have a lot of fun with this game as long as you're just able to forgive a lot of the problems the game has. If you can, then this is definitely one Fox you won't regret saving the galaxy with.